A toddler found a German shepherd abandoned in a broken doghouse. What baby did next left everyone in tears. What happened next will shock you and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the bond between children and animals. Before we begin this incredible journey, make sure to like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe for more heartwarming tales, and comment below to let us know where you're listening from around the world. The story you're about to listen to will change how you see the power of a child's intuition and the unbreakable connection between innocent hearts and wounded souls. Thunder crashed overhead like the world was splitting apart. Rain hammered against the windows of the small house on Maple Street, each drop sounding like tiny fists demanding entry. 5-year-old Ethan pressed his face against the cold glass, his breath fogging the window as he stared into the darkness outside. "Mama, do you hear that?" Ethan whispered, his small hand tugging at his mother Sarah's sleeve. Sarah looked up from her book, rain-soaked hair still damp from her evening jog. "Hear what, sweetheart? It's just the storm." But Ethan shook his head, his eyes wide with certainty that only children possess. "No, Mama. Someone's crying. Someone's scared and cold." The wind howled through the trees, bending them like dancers in a violent performance. Sarah listened carefully, hearing nothing but the symphony of the storm. "It's probably just the wind, baby. Storms can sound like lots of things." Ethan's father, Michael, appeared in the doorway, towel drying his hair. "What's wrong with our little guy?" "He thinks he hears crying outside," Sarah explained, ruffling Ethan's sandy hair. Michael chuckled softly. "That's just the storm talking, buddy. Sometimes wind through the trees sounds like voices." But Ethan wasn't convinced. He pressed his ear against the window again, his small body trembling, not from cold, but from something deeper. "It's not the wind, Daddy. It's someone who needs help, someone who's all alone." Another crash of thunder made the house shake, and the lights flickered. In that brief moment of near darkness, Ethan swore he heard it again, a soft, broken whimper that seemed to call directly to his heart. "Please," Ethan begged, tears welling in his eyes. "Can we just look? What if someone really needs us?" Sarah knelt beside her son, studying his face. There was something in his expression she'd never seen before, not just childhood imagination, but genuine concern that seemed far beyond his years. "Ethan, it's dangerous outside. The storm is too strong." "But Mama," Ethan's voice broke slightly, "what if it was me out there? What if I was scared and alone and no one came to help?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to their hearts. Michael and Sarah exchanged glances, seeing their son's compassion blazing in his small features, like a flame that refused to be extinguished. "Tomorrow morning," Michael promised. "If the storm stops, we'll look around outside, but right now, it's not safe." Ethan nodded reluctantly, but his eyes remained fixed on the window. Throughout the night, even as the storm began to calm, he woke several times listening. Each time he heard it, that soft, desperate sound that seemed to reach through the darkness specifically for him. Sarah found him at dawn, still at the window, wearing his rain boots and clutching his small flashlight shaped like a cartoon dog. "Mama, it stopped crying," he said quietly, "but I think it's waiting for me." The morning sun struggled through the remaining clouds, casting long shadows across their backyard. Sarah looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw something that made her breath catch. This wasn't the face of a child playing pretend. This was the face of someone who had heard a call for help and couldn't ignore it. "All right," she said softly, "let's go look." They stepped outside together, Ethan leading the way with determined steps that seemed too purposeful for a 5-year-old. He walked past their garden, past the old oak tree where his swing hung motionless, and toward the overgrown lot behind their property that had been empty for years. "Ethan, honey, there's nothing back there but weeds and—" But Ethan had stopped dead in his tracks. His flashlight, unnecessary in the morning light, but still clutched in his small fist, pointed towards something that made Sarah's heart skip. Hidden beneath a tangle of wild grass and broken branches was a structure she'd never noticed before. A doghouse, but not just any doghouse. This one was broken, its roof caved in on one side, its wooden walls weathered and rotting, and from inside came the faintest sound of labored breathing. "Mama," Ethan whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of triumph and terror. "I found him." Sarah grabbed Ethan's shoulder, pulling him back. "Don't go near it, baby. We don't know what's in there." But Ethan gently freed himself from her grip and took another step forward. "He's hurt, Mama. He's been waiting all night for someone to find him." As they approached the broken shelter, Sarah's maternal instincts screamed danger, but something in her son's calm certainty made her follow. Ethan knelt beside the entrance, his small voice suddenly soft and soothing. "Hey there," he whispered. "It's okay. I heard you calling for help." From the darkness inside the collapsed doghouse came a movement, slow, painful, but unmistakably hopeful. A massive German shepherd emerged, his golden and black coat matted with mud and rain. One of his front paws was clearly injured, held at an odd angle, and his ribs showed through his thin fur. But what stopped Sarah's heart wasn't the dog's condition, it was his eyes. Those deep, intelligent eyes looked directly at Ethan with an expression of pure recognition, as if he'd been waiting his entire life for this small boy to find him. The dog didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth, didn't show any sign of aggression, despite his obvious pain and fear. Instead, he lowered his massive head and whimpered softly, the same sound Ethan had heard through the storm. "See, Mama," Ethan said, reaching out slowly to touch the dog's head. "He told me he was scared. He told me he needed help." Sarah watched in amazement as the injured German shepherd allowed her 5-year-old son to pet him, his tail managing a weak wag despite his condition. "Ethan, we need to be careful. He's hurt and scared." "He's not scared anymore," Ethan said with absolute certainty. "He knows I came to help him." The dog seemed to understand every word. He struggled to his feet, his injured paw never touching the ground, and took a hesitant step toward Ethan. Then another, until he was close enough to gently rest his massive head against the little boy's chest. "I'm going to call you Buddy," Ethan announced, wrapping his small arms around the dog's neck. "And I promise I'll take care of you." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes as she watched her son show the kind of unconditional love and acceptance that adults often struggle to give. "Ethan, we need to call Daddy, and probably a veterinarian. This dog needs medical help." But Ethan wasn't listening to practical concerns. He was having a conversation with Buddy, a one-sided conversation that somehow seemed to be understood perfectly. "You were lost, weren't you?" Ethan murmured, stroking the dog's matted fur. "Someone left you here, and you didn't know what to do. But it's okay now. I found you, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again." Buddy's response was to gently lick Ethan's face, his tail wagging with more strength than seemed possible for a dog in his condition. "Sarah?" Michael's voice called from their backyard. "Where are you guys?" "Back here," Sarah called, her voice thick with emotion. "Michael, you need to see this." When Michael appeared through the overgrown grass and saw his son sitting beside a massive German shepherd, his first instinct was panic. "Ethan, get away from that dog right now." "No, Daddy," Ethan said calmly, not moving an inch. "This is Buddy. He's hurt, and he needs our help. He's been waiting for us." Michael approached cautiously, but something in the scene made him slow down. The dog wasn't acting aggressive or territorial. Instead, he seemed to be seeking comfort and protection, specifically from their 5-year-old son. "Where did he come from?" Michael asked, kneeling beside Sarah. "He was in that broken doghouse," Sarah explained. "Ethan heard him crying during the storm. Michael, I've never seen anything like this. It's like they already know each other." Michael studied the dog's condition with growing concern. "He's been abandoned. Look at him. He's malnourished, injured, probably been out here for days, maybe weeks." Ethan looked up at his parents with eyes that held a wisdom far beyond his years. "He told me in my dreams last night that he was waiting for someone who would love him. He said he knew I would come." The adults exchanged glances, unsure how to respond to their son's certainty about his dream communication with a dog he had never met. But watching Buddy's calm acceptance of Ethan's presence, they couldn't deny that something extraordinary was happening. "Can we keep him, Mama? Please?" Ethan asked, his voice carrying the weight of every 5-year-old's most important request. "He doesn't have anyone else, and I promised I would take care of him." Before Sarah could answer, Buddy lifted his head and looked directly at her. In his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Not just pain and hope, but intelligence and gratitude. This dog somehow understood that her son had saved his life. "We need to get him to a veterinarian first," Michael said practically. "Then we'll see about everything else." But as they prepared to help Buddy to their car, Ethan made an announcement that would change everything. "Daddy, Buddy says there's someone bad who hurt him. Someone who might come looking for him. He's scared that person will find him here. Michael frowned. Ethan, dogs don't... His words were cut off by the sound of a car engine idling at the end of their street. Through the trees, they could see a rusted pickup truck parked where it had a clear view of their backyard. Buddy's entire body tensed. A low growl rumbled from his chest, not directed at the family, but toward the unseen vehicle. His hackles rose, and despite his injuries, he positioned himself protectively between Ethan and the direction of the truck. The engine revved once, twice, then slowly drove away, but the message was clear. Someone had been watching. Someone knew exactly where Buddy was. "Mama," Ethan whispered, his arms tightening around Buddy's neck, "I think the bad person found us." The truck's engine faded into the distance, but the fear it left behind hung in the air like smoke. Buddy's muscles remained tense, his ears perked forward, listening for any sign of danger. Sarah and Michael exchanged worried glances over their son's head, both thinking the same thing. How could a 5-year-old know about someone bad connected to this dog? "We need to get him inside," Michael said, his voice low and urgent. "Now." Getting Buddy to the house proved more challenging than expected. The injured German Shepherd was larger than any of them had anticipated, and his hurt paw made walking difficult. But what amazed them most was how he seemed to understand the urgency of the situation. Despite his pain, Buddy limped along beside Ethan, never once pulling away or showing aggression. "It's okay, Buddy," Ethan murmured as they slowly made their way across the yard. "You're safe now. The bad man can't hurt you anymore." Once inside, Sarah immediately called their family veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, explaining the situation in hushed tones while Michael kept watch at the windows. Ethan, meanwhile, had taken it upon himself to make Buddy comfortable, bringing him water in his own cereal bowl and offering him half of his peanut butter sandwich. "Ethan, you shouldn't feed him until the vet checks him," Sarah said gently. "But he's hungry, Mama. He hasn't eaten in so long." Ethan's voice carried a conviction that made Sarah pause. "He told me his tummy hurts from being empty." Buddy ate the sandwich pieces slowly, carefully, as if he couldn't quite believe food was being offered freely. His eyes never left Ethan's face, watching the little boy with an intensity that was both touching and unsettling. Dr. Martinez arrived within an hour, a kind woman in her 50s who had been treating the family's pets for years, but even she seemed surprised by what she found. "This is remarkable," she said after examining Buddy thoroughly. "He's malnourished and has a fractured paw that's been untreated for weeks, but his temperament is incredibly calm. Most dogs in his condition would be aggressive, or at least fearful of strangers. He's not afraid because Ethan found him," Sarah explained, watching as her son sat patiently beside Buddy during the examination. They seemed to have some kind of connection. Dr. Martinez nodded, but her expression was troubled. "I need to ask you something important. This dog has signs of previous abuse, old scars, healed breaks that were never properly treated, and he has no microchip, no collar, no identification. Where exactly did you find him?" Michael described the broken doghouse in the empty lot, and Dr. Martinez's frown deepened. "I need to report this. Dogs don't end up in that condition by accident. Someone was responsible for his care and failed him badly." "What does that mean for us?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer would complicate their lives. "It means someone might come looking for him, and it means we need to document his condition in case there are legal issues." As if sensing the adult's concern, Buddy lifted his head and looked directly at Ethan. The little boy immediately understood the unspoken communication. "Buddy says his name wasn't always Buddy," Ethan announced quietly. "He says the bad man called him something else, something mean, but he likes Buddy better because it means friend." Dr. Martinez paused in her examination. "Ethan, what else does Buddy tell you?" The question surprised the adults. They had expected the veterinarian to dismiss their son's claims about communicating with the dog. Instead, she seemed genuinely interested. "He says he lived in a dark place before, and he says the bad man hurt other dogs too, not just him. He says he ran away during a big storm, but he couldn't run very far because his paw was hurt." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Ethan, you can't possibly know all that." "But I do, Mama. Buddy shows me pictures in my head when I close my eyes. He's really smart, and he remembers everything." Dr. Martinez finished her examination and sat back on her heels. "I've been a veterinarian for 25 years, and I've learned to pay attention when children seem to understand animals in ways adults can't. There's something special happening here." She turned to Michael and Sarah. If you're serious about keeping this dog, I'll support you, but I need to be honest. Someone who abuses animals to this extent doesn't usually give up easily. You need to be prepared for the possibility that his previous owner might try to reclaim him. He's not going back to someone who hurt him, Ethan said with a firmness that surprised everyone. I won't let that happen. The adults looked at this 5-year-old boy who spoke with the determination of someone much older, and they realized their lives had just taken a turn none of them had expected. Over the next 3 days, Buddy's presence in their home created a routine that felt both natural and miraculous. He slept beside Ethan's bed, his large body curled protectively around the little boy's sleeping form. During the day, he followed Ethan everywhere, his injured paw healing slowly, but his spirit growing stronger by the hour. But it was the small moments that convinced Sarah and Michael that their son's connection with Buddy was something beyond ordinary pet ownership. Ethan would wake up in the middle of the night, not from nightmares, but from what he called Buddy's memories. He would tell his parents about dreams where he saw through Buddy's eyes, memories of a dark, cramped space, of other dogs who cried in fear, of a man whose voice made Buddy's whole body shake. "Mama," Ethan said on the third morning, "Buddy remembers a girl dog who was sick. The bad man didn't take care of her, and she got very sad and stopped eating. Buddy says he tried to share his food with her, but it wasn't enough." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Whether her son was truly receiving these images from Buddy or creating them from an incredibly empathetic imagination, the stories painted a picture of systematic animal abuse that made her sick to her stomach. "Ethan, if Buddy tells you anything else about the bad man, you need to tell us right away, okay?" "I will, Mama, but Buddy says the bad man is looking for him. He says we need to be careful." As if summoned by Ethan's words, Buddy lifted his head from where he'd been resting and let out a low, warning growl. His ears perked forward, and his entire body tensed. "What is it, boy?" Michael asked, moving toward the front window. Outside, the same rusted pickup truck from 3 days ago was parked across the street. A man sat behind the wheel, his face hidden in shadow, but his attention clearly focused on their house. "He's back," Ethan whispered, his small hand finding Buddy's fur. "Buddy says that's him. That's the bad man." The truck sat there for nearly an hour, its engine occasionally revving as if the driver was deciding whether to approach. Buddy never relaxed during that entire time, positioning himself between Ethan and the front door, his protective instincts overriding his injuries. When the truck finally drove away, Michael made a decision. "I'm calling the police." "And telling them what?" Sarah asked. "That our son thinks he can communicate telepathically with a dog we found in an abandoned dog house?" "I'm telling them that someone is stalking our property and we have reason to believe they're connected to animal abuse." The police officer who responded, Officer Johnson, was surprisingly thorough in his questioning. He took notes about Buddy's condition, photographed the injuries Dr. Martinez had documented, and listened carefully to Ethan's account of finding the dog. "Son," Officer Johnson said, kneeling to Ethan's level, "you said the dog tells you things about the bad man. Can you tell me what he looks like?" Ethan closed his eyes, his small hand resting on Buddy's head. For a moment, he was silent, as if listening to something only he could hear. "He's tall and has angry eyes," Ethan said finally. "He has a scar on his hand from when one of the dogs bit him. And he smells like cigarettes and something else that makes Buddy scared." Officer Johnson wrote everything down, then turned to the parents. "I'll run the description and see if it matches anyone in our database for animal abuse. In the meantime, I'd recommend installing security cameras and keeping your doors locked." That night, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She checked on Ethan twice, both times finding him curled up beside Buddy, his small hand resting on the dog's fur. There was something about the peaceful expression on her son's face that made her believe, despite her rational mind's protests, that whatever was happening between boy and dog was real. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Dr. Martinez returned, but this time she wasn't alone. With her was a woman Sarah didn't recognize. Tall, professional-looking, with kind eyes and a notebook in her hand. "This is Dr. Amanda Chen," Dr. Martinez explained. "She's an animal behaviorist who specializes in trauma recovery. I asked her to come because I think Buddy's case might be more significant than we initially realized." Dr. Chen spent 2 hours observing Buddy and Ethan together, taking notes and asking gentle questions. She watched as Ethan seemed to know exactly when Buddy needed water, when he was in pain, and when he needed comfort. "I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. Chen admitted to the parents while Ethan played in the backyard with Buddy. "Your son appears to have an extraordinary ability to read this dog's emotional and physical states. It's not telepathy, but it's something beyond normal human-animal communication." "Is that normal?" Sarah asked. "It's rare, but not unheard of. Some children, especially those with high empathy levels, can develop incredibly strong bonds with traumatized animals. The animal learns to trust completely, and the child learns to interpret the animal's needs with remarkable accuracy." She paused, watching Ethan and Buddy through the window. "But there's something else. Based on Buddy's behavioral patterns and the stories your son has told you, I believe this dog was likely used in illegal dogfighting operations. The injuries, the fear responses, the signs of systematic abuse, they all point to that conclusion." Michael felt his blood run cold. Dogfighting? It's more common than people realize, and it's incredibly dangerous for everyone involved. If Buddy escaped from that kind of operation, his previous owner won't give up easily. These dogs represent significant financial investment to the people who abuse them. As if to underscore Dr. Chen's words, Buddy suddenly appeared at the back door, his ears alert and his body tense. Behind him, Ethan ran toward the house, his face pale with fear. "Mama, Daddy," Ethan called out. "Buddy says the bad man is coming back. He says this time he's not just watching, he's coming to take Buddy away." The adults looked at each other, then at the dog who stood protectively in front of the little boy, his intelligent eyes conveying a message that transcended species. "I will not let anyone hurt this child." Outside, the sound of a truck engine grew louder, closer than it had ever been before. This time, it wasn't just passing by. This time, it was pulling into their driveway. "Everyone stay inside," Michael ordered, moving toward the front door, "and call 911. But as Sarah reached for the phone, Ethan's voice stopped her cold. "Mama, Buddy says the bad man has a gun. He says he's not going to ask nicely this time." Through the front window, they could see a tall man getting out of the rusted pickup truck. He was walking toward their house with the confident stride of someone who believed he had every right to be there, and tucked into his belt, clearly visible, was exactly what Ethan had warned them about. The bad man hadn't just found them. He had come to take Buddy back, and he was prepared to use force to do it. "Stay calm, Doctor," Chen whispered, her professional demeanor slipping for the first time. "Don't let him see how scared you are." But Ethan wasn't scared. Standing beside Buddy, his small hand resting on the dog's massive head, he looked up at his parents with eyes that held no fear, only determination. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Buddy says he won't let the bad man hurt us. He says this time he's strong enough to protect his family." The knock on the door came 3 times, sharp and demanding. When Michael opened it, they came face to face with the man who had haunted Buddy's nightmares, and who was about to learn that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power. The man standing on their doorstep was exactly as Ethan had described, tall, with angry eyes that seemed to look right through people rather than at them. A fresh scar ran across his right hand, and the smell of cigarettes and something else, something darker, clung to him like a shadow. "I'm here for my dog," he said without introduction, his voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. "German Shepherd, goes by Rex. Someone saw him around here." Michael stood in the doorway, blocking the man's view of the house interior. "I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken. We don't have your dog." The man's eyes narrowed. "Look, I know he's here. That dog is valuable property, and I want him back, now." "Even if we had seen a German Shepherd, which we haven't," Michael said carefully, "don't you think you'd need to prove ownership? Papers, veterinary records, something like that?" Behind Michael, Sarah had positioned herself between the front door and where Ethan sat with Buddy in the living room. Dr. Chen had quietly moved to the back door, ready to call for help if needed. But what none of the adults expected was what happened next. Ethan stood up, his small hand still resting on Buddy's head, and walked toward the front door. "Buddy," he called out, his voice clear and calm. "Come here, boy." "Ethan, no!" Sarah whispered urgently, but her son had already reached the entryway. The moment Buddy appeared beside Ethan, the man's entire demeanor changed. His eyes lit up with a mixture of satisfaction and something much darker. "There he is. Rex, come here, now." Buddy's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. His entire body began to shake, his ears flattened against his head, and he pressed himself against Ethan's legs. But he didn't move toward the man. Instead, he let out a low whine that sounded like pure terror. "He doesn't want to go with you," Ethan said, his 5-year-old voice steady despite the tension filling the air. "His name isn't Rex, it's Buddy, and you heard him." The man laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Kid, that dog doesn't get to choose. He belongs to me, and I'm taking him back." "No," Ethan said simply. "You can't have him." The man took a step forward, his hand moving toward the gun at his belt. "Listen, kid, this is between me and your parents. That dog is worth a lot of money to me, and I'm not leaving without him." Michael moved protectively in front of his son. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave our property. If you believe you have a legal claim to this dog, you can pursue it through proper channels." "Legal claim?" The man spat on their porch. "I don't need legal claims. I raised that dog from a pup, trained him myself. He knows exactly what happens when he doesn't obey." As if to prove his point, the man made a sharp whistling sound, the kind of piercing noise that would normally make any dog immediately respond. But Buddy didn't move. Instead, he moved even closer to Ethan, his massive body creating a protective barrier between the little boy and the man at the door. "Rex!" the man shouted, his voice taking on a threatening edge. "Get over here right now, or you know what happens." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and for the first time since finding Buddy, the adult saw true fear in the dog's eyes. But still, he didn't move toward his former owner. "He's not going with you?" Ethan repeated, his small hand stroking Buddy's trembling head. "He told me what you did to him. He told me about the other dogs, too. He's not scared of you anymore because he knows I'll protect him." The man's face darkened. "Look, kid, you don't understand how this works. That dog was bred for fighting. He's dangerous. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "He's not dangerous," Ethan said with absolute certainty. "He's gentle and kind, and he just wants someone to love him. You made him fight other dogs, but that's not what he wanted to do. He hated it." Something in Ethan's words seemed to hit a nerve. The man's hand moved closer to his weapon. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because he tells me," Ethan said simply. "He shows me the memories, the dark place where you kept him, the other dogs who were scared, the girl dog who got sick because you didn't take care of her." The man went very still. "What did you just say?" "The brown and white girl dog. She had sad eyes and she wouldn't eat. Buddy tried to share his food with her, but you got angry and hurt him for it. She died because you didn't care." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Dr. Chen moved closer, her phone ready to call 911. Michael tensed, preparing to protect his family if necessary, but none of them were prepared for what the man said next. "There's no way you could know about that dog unless—" His voice trailed off, and for the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. "Unless he really is telling you somehow?" The admission hung in the air like a confession. This man had just confirmed everything Ethan had claimed about the abuse, about other dogs, about systematic cruelty that had gone on for who knows how long. "I'm calling the police," Sarah announced, her voice shaking with anger rather than fear. "Wait," the man said, but now his voice carried a different tone. "Look, maybe we can work something out. That dog, he was special, smart, too smart for his own good sometimes. If he's really telling you things—" "He is," Ethan said, "and he told me something else too. He told me where you keep the other dogs. He remembers the place. The barn with the red roof behind the gas station on Highway 9. The man's face went pale. "That's impossible!" "Buddy remembers everything," Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength. "He remembers the cages that were too small. He remembers the dogs who were hurt so bad they couldn't fight anymore. He remembers what you did to them." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her professional training taking over. "Sir, I'm an animal behaviorist, and I can tell you that this dog shows clear signs of systematic abuse and trauma associated with dogfighting operations. If you leave now, we might be willing to let this matter drop. But if you continue to threaten this family or attempt to take this dog—" "You'll what?" the man sneered, but his earlier confidence was gone. "Call the cops? Tell them a 5-year-old kid can read a dog's mind?" "No," a new voice said from behind them. "We'll tell them about the illegal dogfighting operation you're running." Everyone turned to see Officer Johnson approaching from the street, his hand resting on his radio. I've been watching this conversation from my patrol car, and I heard some very interesting things. The man's hand moved away from his gun, but his eyes darted between the police officer and the door, calculating his options. "Officer," Michael said, relief evident in his voice, "this man claims to own our dog, but based on what we've learned, we believe the dog was stolen or abused." Officer Johnson nodded. "I ran the description your son gave me yesterday through our database. Turns out we've been looking for a man matching this gentleman's description in connection with an illegal dog fighting ring. Several complaints, but no concrete evidence." He looked directly at the man on the porch. "Until now." "You can't prove anything," the man said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually," Dr. Chen interjected, "we can. This dog's injuries are consistent with forced fighting. The healed fractures, the bite marks, the psychological trauma, it's all documented. And if what this child says is true about a location on Highway 9. "Buddy says there are still dogs there," Ethan added quietly. "3 of them. They're scared and hungry and waiting for someone to help them." Officer Johnson spoke into his radio, requesting backup and animal control. Then he turned back to the man. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning, and we're going to need to take a look at that property your young friend here mentioned." The man looked at Buddy one more time, and something passed between them, a final acknowledgement that their relationship had permanently changed. "That dog was worth more money than you people will ever see," he said bitterly. "He's not worth money," Ethan replied, his arms wrapped around Buddy's neck. "He's worth love, and love isn't something you can buy or sell or take away from someone." As Officer Johnson led the man away, Buddy's entire body seemed to relax for the first time since they'd found him. The constant tension, the fearful glances toward windows and doors, the protective positioning, all of it melted away like ice in sunshine. "It's over, boy," Michael said softly, kneeling beside his son and the dog. "He can't hurt you anymore." But the real healing was just beginning. Over the following weeks, as the legal proceedings unfolded and the man was charged with multiple counts of animal abuse and illegal gambling, Buddy transformed before their eyes. The scared, injured dog, who had cowered in a broken doghouse, became a confident, loving companion who followed Ethan everywhere with joy rather than fear. The veterinary visits became routine checkups rather than emergency treatments. Buddy's paw healed completely. His weight returned to normal, and his coat regained its lustrous shine. But, more importantly, his spirit came back to life. "Mama, Buddy had a dream last night," Ethan announced one morning over breakfast. But it wasn't a scary dream. He dreamed about running in a big field with no fences, and nobody was yelling at him to fight. Sarah smiled, watching as Buddy lay peacefully beside Ethan's chair, occasionally accepting bits of bacon that her son sneaked to him. What else did he dream about? He dreamed that he had a real family who loved him no matter what. And when he woke up, he realized it wasn't a dream anymore. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening when Ethan fell asleep on the living room floor while watching television. Sarah was about to wake him and send him to bed when she noticed something extraordinary. Buddy had positioned himself next to Ethan, but not just as a companion. He was watching the little boy's breathing, occasionally nudging him gently when Ethan shifted into an uncomfortable position. When Ethan began to stir, showing signs of entering a lighter sleep phase, Buddy would rest his head on the child's chest, and Ethan would immediately settle back into peaceful sleep. "He's protecting his dreams," Sarah whispered to Michael. "Buddy is making sure Ethan doesn't have nightmares." But the most remarkable change came when Ethan got sick with a fever a few weeks later. Sarah woke up in the middle of the night to find Buddy standing beside her bed, whining softly and pawing at her hand. "What is it, boy?" she asked, but Buddy was already leading her toward Ethan's room. Her son's fever had spiked dangerously high, far beyond what his earlier temperature had indicated. If Buddy hadn't alerted her, the situation could have become serious. "How did you know?" Sarah asked the dog as they waited in the emergency room for Ethan's fever to break. "How did you know he was getting worse?" Buddy simply rested his head on her lap, his eyes reflecting the same wisdom and love she saw every day between him and her son. Dr. Martinez, who had become not just their veterinarian but a close family friend, had an explanation. Dogs can sense changes in body temperature, heart rate, even chemical changes that precede illness. But Buddy's connection with Ethan goes beyond normal canine senses. They've bonded so completely that Buddy has appointed himself Ethan's personal guardian. The legal case concluded with the man receiving a 5-year prison sentence and lifetime ban from owning animals. The 3 dogs found at the Highway 9 location were rescued and eventually found loving homes. Officer Johnson told them that without Ethan's detailed information about the location, they might never have found the other animals in time. "Your son saved more than just Buddy," he explained. "He helped us shut down an operation that had been hurting animals for years." But for Ethan, the legal victory was less important than the daily victories he witnessed in Buddy's recovery. The dog who had once flinched at sudden movements now ran joyfully through their backyard. The animal who had been trained to fight now spent his days learning tricks that brought laughter instead of violence. "Buddy says he wants to learn how to shake hands," Ethan announced one afternoon. "Not to fight, but to say hello to people." And so they taught him, patiently working until Buddy could offer his paw in greeting to visitors, his tail wagging with pride at mastering this peaceful skill. The transformation was complete on the day Ethan decided Buddy needed a proper dog house, not to replace a broken shelter, but to have a place that was truly his own. They built it together, father and son, with Buddy supervising from a comfortable spot in the shade. When it was finished, painted bright blue with Buddy's name carefully lettered above the door, Ethan made a ceremony of showing it to his best friend. "This is your house, Buddy," he said solemnly. "Nobody can take it away from you, and nobody can hurt you here. This is where you live now, forever and always." Buddy sniffed the new structure carefully, walked around it twice, then looked back at Ethan with what could only be described as a smile. But instead of going inside, he lay down in front of the entrance, positioning himself where he could see both his new house and the back door of the human house where his family lived. "He doesn't want to sleep in there alone," Ethan observed. "He wants to be where he can protect all of us." That night, Sarah found Ethan curled up in a sleeping bag beside Buddy's new house, the boy and dog sleeping peacefully under the stars. When she tried to convince Ethan to come inside, he shook his head. "Buddy's first night in his new house shouldn't be alone, Mama. He needs to know his family is nearby." So Sarah brought out more sleeping bags, and the whole family spent that night camping in their backyard, christening Buddy's new home with love, laughter, and the kind of security that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. As they lay there under the moonlight, Buddy's head resting on Ethan's chest and his powerful body relaxed in complete trust, Sarah realized that her son had been right from the very beginning. Buddy hadn't just been calling for help during that storm. He had been calling for family. And somehow, through the mysterious connection between a compassionate child and a wounded animal, that call had been answered in the most perfect way possible. But their story was far from over. 3 months after Buddy's rescue, just when life had settled into a peaceful routine, something happened that would test everything they thought they knew about safety and protection. It started on a Thursday night in late autumn. The air had turned crisp, and Sarah had just finished putting Ethan to bed when Buddy began acting strangely. Instead of settling down for the night beside Ethan's bed as he usually did, the German Shepherd paced restlessly through the house, his ears perked and his nose working overtime. "What's wrong, boy?" Michael asked, looking up from his laptop. "You seem nervous." Buddy paused in his pacing and looked directly at Michael, his intelligent eyes conveying urgency. Then he walked to the front door and growled low in his throat. Not the terrified whimper he'd made when his former owner appeared, but a warning growl that suggested he sensed danger approaching. Sarah joined them in the living room, noting Buddy's agitated state. Maybe it's just a raccoon or something in the garbage. But Buddy's behavior became more insistent. He moved to each window in turn, sniffing at the frames and letting out soft whines. When he reached the kitchen window that faced their backyard, his growl became more pronounced. "Mama, Daddy, what's wrong with Buddy?" Ethan's voice came from the hallway. He had climbed out of bed and was rubbing his sleepy eyes. "We're not sure, sweetie," Sarah said. "He seems to hear something outside that we can't." Ethan walked over to Buddy and placed his small hand on the dog's head. For a moment, both boy and dog stood perfectly still, as if engaged in silent communication. Then Ethan's eyes widened with fear. "Someone's watching our house," he whispered. "Buddy says there's a man hiding by the fence. He's been there for a long time, just watching and waiting." Michael immediately moved to the window, peering through the blinds into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just their backyard, the swing set, and Buddy's blue doghouse illuminated by their security light. But then, just at the edge of the light's reach, he caught a glimpse of movement near the back fence. "There is someone out there," he confirmed, his voice tense. "Sarah, call 911. As Sarah reached for the phone, Buddy's behavior intensified. He began barking, not his usual playful bark, but a deep protective sound that echoed through the house like an alarm. Between barks, he would look at Ethan and whine, as if trying to communicate something urgent. "Buddy says the man has been coming here for 3 nights, Ethan translated, his voice shaking slightly. "He says the man has tools with him, bad tools that can hurt the fence and maybe hurt us." "Tools?" Michael asked, his blood running cold. "What kind of tools?" Ethan closed his eyes, concentrating on whatever message Buddy was sending him. "Metal things that can cut. And something else. Something that makes Buddy really scared." Before anyone could respond, they heard the sound that confirmed their worst fears, the metallic snap of wire cutters working on their chain-link fence. Someone was cutting their way into the backyard. "That's it," Michael said, grabbing his phone. "I'm calling Officer Johnson directly." But as he dialed, the cutting sounds stopped. Instead, they heard footsteps, deliberate, careful footsteps moving across their backyard toward the house. Buddy's barking became more frantic, and he positioned himself directly in front of Ethan, his protective instincts in full force. "Buddy says we need to go upstairs," Ethan said urgently. "He says the man knows about the back door. He knows how to get in." As if summoned by Ethan's words, they heard the unmistakable sound of someone testing the handle on their back door. The lock held, but the attempted entry sent a chill through the entire family. Michael grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet while Sarah herded Ethan toward the staircase. But Buddy had other ideas. Instead of following them upstairs, he planted himself at the bottom of the steps, his massive body blocking access to the second floor. "Buddy, come on," Sarah called softly. "Come upstairs with us." But Buddy shook his head, an eerily human gesture that surprised them all. He was staying put, positioning himself between his family and whoever was trying to break into their home. The back door handle rattled again, more insistently this time. Then they heard the sound that made Sarah's heart stop. The squeak of the door opening. The lock had been picked or forced. "He's inside," Michael whispered into his phone to the 911 dispatcher. "Someone has broken into our house. We're upstairs with our son and our dog." Footsteps echoed through the kitchen, slow and deliberate. Whoever had entered their home wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. He wanted them to know he was there. Buddy's growling reached a new intensity, but he didn't move from his position at the base of the stairs. Instead, he crouched low, his powerful muscles coiled like springs ready to release. "Buddy says the man is looking for something," Ethan whispered from the top of the stairs. "He says the man is angry because the other bad man went to jail. He says this man wants to hurt us because we helped catch his friend." The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. This wasn't a random break-in. This was revenge. Someone connected to Buddy's former owner had come to settle a score. The footsteps moved from the kitchen into the living room, and they could hear furniture being pushed around, objects being thrown. The intruder was searching for something, or someone. "Here, boy," a rough voice called from downstairs. "Come here, Rex. I know you're in here somewhere." Buddy's entire body tensed at the sound of his former name, but he didn't move. Instead, he looked up at Ethan with eyes that conveyed a clear message. "I will protect you, no matter what." "Where are you hiding that dog?" the voice called, closer now to the stairs. "And where's the little kid who thinks he can talk to animals? I got some things to tell him about what happens to snitches." The threat was unmistakable, and it was directed at Ethan. Sarah pulled her son closer, her protective instincts matching Buddy's in their intensity. "The police are on their way," Michael called down the stairs, hoping to buy time. "You need to leave now before you make this worse for yourself." Laughter echoed from below, cold, bitter laughter that held no humor. "Police? You think I'm worried about the police? By the time they get here, I'll have what I came for and be long gone." The footsteps began ascending the stairs, and Buddy's growling reached a crescendo. But instead of charging down to meet the threat, he backed up slightly, allowing himself room to maneuver while still blocking access to the second floor. "Smart dog," the voice said, now only a few steps below where Buddy stood, but not smart enough. What happened next would be seared into their memories forever. As the intruder rounded the corner of the staircase, flashlight in one hand and something metallic in the other, Buddy didn't attack with the vicious training his former owner had tried to instill. Instead, he did something that demonstrated the complete transformation his love for Ethan had created. Buddy stood his ground, planted himself like an immovable force, and simply refused to let the man pass. When the intruder tried to push past him, Buddy used his considerable size and weight to gently but firmly block the way. When the man tried to step around him, Buddy moved to intercept. No violence, no aggression, just an absolute, unwavering refusal to allow harm to reach his family. "Move, you stupid mutt!" the man snarled, trying to shove Buddy aside. But Buddy had found something stronger than the fear and aggression that had been beaten into him. He had found love worth protecting, and that love made him immovable. The standoff continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The man became increasingly frustrated with Buddy's passive resistance, while the dog remained calm but absolutely determined. Then they heard the most beautiful sound in the world, sirens approaching their house. Multiple vehicles, by the sound of it, growing louder by the second. The intruder heard them too. He looked down at Buddy, who hadn't moved from his protective position, and seemed to realize that his time had run out. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his voice had lost its threatening edge. He was trapped between a dog who wouldn't be moved and police who were surrounding the house. "Yes, it is," came a small voice from the top of the stairs. Ethan had quietly moved to where he could see down to where Buddy stood guard. "Buddy says you're just scared because your friend got in trouble for being mean to animals, but being mean back won't make anything better." The man looked up at the 5-year-old boy who had been instrumental in exposing the dogfighting operation, and something in his expression shifted. "Kid, you don't understand what you've done. That operation was supporting a lot of people. You've ruined lives." "No," Ethan replied with the simple clarity that only children possess. "The bad people ruin their own lives by hurting animals. Buddy and the other dogs never wanted to fight. They just wanted to be loved." Before the man could respond, the front door burst open and Officer Johnson's voice filled the house. "Police, everyone identify yourselves." "Upstairs," Michael called. "Families upstairs. Intruders on the staircase." The next few minutes were a controlled chaos of police officers securing the scene, the intruder being arrested, and statements being taken. But through it all, Buddy remained at his post until Officer Johnson himself came upstairs to check on the family. "You can relax now, boy," the officer said, scratching Buddy behind the ears. "Your family's safe." Only then did Buddy move from his position, bounding up the stairs to Ethan and covering the little boy's face with gentle licks. "Buddy says he was never really scared," Ethan announced, hugging his protector. "He says protecting his family isn't scary. It's what love does." Officer Johnson shook his head in amazement. "I've been a cop for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what that dog just did. He could have attacked, could have been violent, but instead he just stood his ground with pure determination." Dr. Chen, who had been called to the scene as part of the investigation, had her own interpretation. Buddy has been completely rehabilitated from his fighting background. Instead of responding to threats with aggression, he's learned to respond with protective love. It's remarkable. The man who had broken into their home turned out to be the brother of Buddy's former owner. He had been planning to steal Buddy back and possibly hurt Ethan as revenge for the testimony that had led to his brother's imprisonment. But he hadn't counted on facing a dog who had been transformed by love into something far more powerful than any trained fighter. As the police led him away, he looked back at Buddy one more time. "That dog used to be a killer," he said to Officer Johnson. "How did they turn him into that?" "They didn't turn him into anything," Ethan piped up from his mother's arms. "They just loved him until he remembered who he really was inside." The investigation revealed that the break-in had been planned for weeks. The man had been watching their house, learning their routines, and waiting for the right moment to strike. But he had underestimated both Buddy's protective instincts and the dog's complete transformation from a weapon into a guardian. "How did Buddy know he was there?" Sarah asked Dr. Chen later as they sat in their living room, trying to process what had happened. "He was acting strange for 3 days before tonight." "Dogs have senses we can barely understand," Dr. Chen explained. "They can detect scents that linger for days, hear sounds at frequencies we can't perceive, and sense emotional states in humans from remarkable distances. Buddy probably detected this man's presence and hostile intentions long before any of you could." But Ethan had his own explanation. Buddy says he remembers the smell of angry people. He says angry people smell different from sad people or happy people. He could smell that this man wanted to hurt us, so he got ready to protect us. That night, after all the police reports had been filed and the last officer had left, the family found themselves too wired to sleep. They sat together in the living room, Buddy sprawled across Ethan's lap, despite being far too large for the position. "I keep thinking about what could have happened," Sarah said quietly. "If Buddy hadn't warned us, if he hadn't been there." "But he was there," Michael pointed out. "He's always going to be there. That's what he does now. He protects his family." Ethan looked up from where he was stroking Buddy's fur. "Buddy says the bad people think dogs are just things they can use to hurt other dogs. But Buddy says dogs are really meant to love people and protect them. He says that's what makes dogs happy, taking care of their families." The simple truth of a 5-year-old's words hung in the air, profound in its innocence. A dog who had been trained to fight had found his true purpose in protection and love. The security company came the next day to upgrade their systems, but somehow the family felt that their best security would always be the German Shepherd, who had learned that love was stronger than fear, that protection was better than aggression, and that family was worth any sacrifice. As they settled into bed that second night, Buddy took up his usual position beside Ethan's bed, but Sarah noticed something different in his posture. Where once he had slept with one ear always alert for danger, now he slept peacefully, completely relaxed. "He's not worried anymore," she realized, watching the dog's steady breathing. "He knows he can handle whatever comes." But what came next would test not just Buddy's protective instincts, but the entire family's faith in the power of love to overcome hatred. What do you think Buddy sensed during those 3 days that the family couldn't detect? Share your thoughts about the incredible bond between animals and children in the comments below. The weeks following the break-in brought an unexpected development that would change not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. It started with a phone call from a local news reporter who had heard about the story through police channels. "We'd like to do a feature on your family and Buddy," the reporter, Jessica Chen, explained to Sarah over the phone. "The story of a child who can communicate with a rescue dog and how that dog has protected your family. It's exactly the kind of positive news people need to hear." Sarah was hesitant. "We're not really looking for publicity. We just want to live our lives quietly." "I understand," Jessica said. "But think about what your story could mean to other families considering pet adoption, or to people who think fighting dogs can never be rehabilitated. Your story proves that love can heal even the deepest trauma." After discussing it with Michael and, surprisingly, asking Ethan for his opinion, they agreed to a brief interview. What they didn't expect was how powerfully the story would resonate with viewers. The news segment aired on a Thursday evening. Jessica had done a beautiful job capturing not just the facts of Buddy's rescue and transformation, but the genuine emotion of watching Ethan and Buddy interact. The camera caught moments that words couldn't describe. The way Buddy's eyes followed Ethan's every movement, how the little boy instinctively knew when his dog needed comfort, and the obvious love that flowed between them. But the most powerful moment came when Jessica asked Ethan to explain how he and Buddy communicated. "People think it's magic or something," Ethan said, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Buddy's massive head in his lap. "But it's not magic. It's just love. When you really, really love someone, you can feel what they feel. Buddy feels what I feel, and I feel what he feels. That's how families work." The segment ended with footage of Buddy in his blue doghouse, no longer hiding or cowering, but confidently surveying his domain while Ethan played nearby. The visual contrast between the broken doghouse where they had found him and his new, secure home was striking. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The news station received hundreds of calls and emails from viewers who had been moved by the story, but more importantly, local animal shelters reported a significant increase in adoption inquiries, particularly for larger dogs and those with difficult backgrounds. 3 days after the news segment aired, they received a call that would lead to the most challenging and rewarding chapter of their journey with Buddy. "Mrs. Williams?" The voice on the phone belonged to Dr. Martinez. "I have an unusual request. There's a situation developing that I think you and your family might be able to help with, but it involves some legal complications." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. What kind of complications? "The district attorney's office is building a case against a major dogfighting network, much larger than the operation Buddy came from. They have suspects, they have evidence, but they need testimony about the long-term effects of fighting dog abuse. They want Buddy to be an exhibit in the trial. An exhibit? Sarah couldn't hide her alarm. What does that mean exactly? They want to show the judge and jury what a properly rehabilitated fighting dog looks like. They want to demonstrate that these animals are victims, not inherently dangerous. And they want Ethan to testify about Buddy's behavior and recovery. The idea of putting her 5-year-old son on a witness stand made Sarah's maternal instincts scream in protest. Dr. Martinez, Ethan is just a little boy. I don't think... Mrs. Williams, Dr. Martinez interrupted gently, there are 12 dogs in this case. 12 animals who are going to be euthanized if the court rules that fighting dogs are too dangerous to rehabilitate. Your family's story and Buddy's transformation could save their lives. The weight of that responsibility settled over Sarah like a blanket. 12 dogs whose fate might depend on a 5-year-old boy's ability to explain the unexplainable bond he shared with a rescued German shepherd. That evening, the family held what Michael jokingly called their first official family meeting, with Buddy as a full participant. They explained the situation to Ethan in terms he could understand. There are other dogs like Buddy who need help, Sarah said carefully. The people who hurt them are going to court, and the judge needs to understand that dogs like Buddy can become good family pets if they're treated with love. Ethan considered this seriously, his hand resting on Buddy's head as if drawing wisdom from their connection. What does Buddy think we should do? The question caught the adults off guard. They had been so focused on the human considerations, Ethan's age, the stress of testimony, the legal implications, that they hadn't considered what Buddy himself might want. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, that familiar expression of concentration crossing his face. When he opened them again, his decision was clear. Buddy says we have to help. He says the other dogs are still having the scared dreams he used to have. He says if we can help them find families like ours, then they can have happy dreams instead. Michael knelt beside his son. Ethan, this would mean going to a courthouse and talking to a judge and lawyers. There would be a lot of people watching, and some of them might ask you hard questions about Buddy and what happened to him. Will Buddy be there with me? Ethan asked. If we do this, yes, Buddy would be there too.
Ethan nodded decisively. Then it's okay. Buddy and I can do anything together.
The next week was a whirlwind of preparation. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Torres, visited their home to meet with Ethan and assess whether a 5-year-old could handle the pressure of testimony. She was initially skeptical.
I've worked with child witnesses before, she told Michael and Sarah privately, but never one this young and never in a case this complex. Are you sure he can handle it?
Her doubts evaporated when she observed Ethan and Buddy together. She watched as Ethan calmly guided Buddy through a series of commands, not the aggressive commands the dog had been trained for, but gentle requests that Buddy seemed eager to fulfill. She saw how Buddy positioned himself protectively when strangers approached Ethan, yet remained calm and non-threatening. This is remarkable, she admitted. I've seen the evidence from other cases, dogs who were so traumatized by fighting that they had to be euthanized because they couldn't be safely handled. But this dog... Buddy's not broken anymore, Ethan said simply. He remembers how to be a good dog because we helped him remember that he was always good inside. Amanda Torres made a decision that would redefine how the legal system approached animal abuse cases. We're not just going to have you testify about Buddy's recovery, she told the family. We're going to build the entire case around the concept that these animals are victims who can be healed, not weapons that need to be destroyed. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in February. The courthouse was packed with reporters, animal rights activists, and curious citizens who had followed the story. But for Ethan, walking into that imposing building with Buddy at his side, it felt like just another day of being with his best friend. The first 2 days of the trial established the prosecution's case against the dogfighting network. The evidence was overwhelming: videos of fights, financial records showing the scope of the operation, and testimony from undercover investigators. But the most powerful evidence came on the third day, when the jury was shown photographs of the 12 dogs who had been rescued from the operation. The images were heartbreaking: dogs with scars covering their bodies, animals so fearful they cowered at the slightest movement, creatures who had been reduced to expressions of pure terror and aggression. Several jury members wiped away tears as the prosecutor described the conditions in which these animals had been kept. The defense will argue that these dogs are dangerous, that they've been so damaged by their treatment that they pose a threat to public safety, Amanda Torres told the jury. They will suggest that euthanasia is the only safe option, but tomorrow, you're going to meet a dog who came from this same kind of operation, and you're going to see what's possible when we choose healing over destruction. That evening, Sarah barely slept. The weight of what her 5-year-old son was about to do, potentially changing the fate of 12 lives, felt enormous. But when she checked on Ethan before going to bed, she found him sleeping peacefully, his arm thrown over Buddy's neck, both of them completely at ease. "They're not worried," Michael observed quietly. "Maybe we shouldn't be either." The courtroom fell silent when Ethan walked in the next morning, his small hand resting on Buddy's head. The German Shepherd moved with calm dignity, his head up, his posture confident but non-threatening. The contrast between this poised, gentle animal and the photographs the jury had seen the day before was startling. Amanda Torres began her examination gently. "Ethan, can you tell the court how you met Buddy?" In his clear 5-year-old voice, Ethan told the story. He described hearing crying during the storm, finding Buddy in the broken doghouse, and the immediate connection he had felt with the injured dog. The courtroom listened in rapt attention, as this little boy described events that had changed not just one dog's life, but an entire family's understanding of love and healing. "Ethan," the prosecutor continued, "some people might say that Buddy was trained to be dangerous. Do you think Buddy is dangerous?" Ethan looked askance at Buddy, who was lying calmly beside the witness stand, his intelligent eyes focused on the boy's face. Buddy used to be scared, and sometimes when people are really scared, they might do scary things to protect themselves. But Buddy was never mean inside. He was just hurt and afraid. "How can you tell the difference?" The question prompted Ethan to give an answer that would be quoted in newspapers across the country. "Mean comes from wanting to hurt people. Scared comes from not wanting to get hurt. Buddy was never mean. He was just scared for a really long time. But when someone loves you and takes care of you, the scared goes away and the real you comes back." The defense attorney, a stern man who had clearly planned to aggressively cross-examine this child witness, seemed to reconsider his approach when he stood up. "How do you attack the testimony of a 5-year-old who speaks with such simple, devastating honesty?" "Ethan," he said, his voice noticeably gentler than it had been with previous witnesses, "isn't it true that you can't really know what Buddy is thinking? Aren't you just guessing about his feelings?" Ethan considered the question seriously. "I don't guess about Mama and Daddy's feelings. When they're sad, I can tell. When they're happy, I can tell. It's the same with Buddy. When you love someone, you pay attention to how they feel. But Buddy is a dog, not a person." "Yes," Ethan agreed, "but love works the same way with everyone. Love means paying attention and caring about how someone feels, whether they're a person or a dog or anything else." The defense attorney paused, clearly realizing that this child's simple wisdom was dismantling his entire argument. In desperation, he played his final card. "Ethan, what if I told you that Buddy might hurt someone someday? What if I said that dogs like Buddy are too dangerous to live in neighborhoods with children?" The courtroom held its breath. This was the central question of the case, whether fighting dogs could ever truly be safe in society. Ethan looked at the lawyer with the patient expression children reserve for adults who don't understand obvious things. "But you're wrong," he said simply. "Buddy protects children. He protected me from the bad man who broke into our house. He would never hurt a child because protecting children is what Buddy does now." Then Ethan did something that no one expected. He stood up and walked over to Buddy, kneeling beside the massive dog. "Buddy, show them." What happened next would become legendary in legal circles. Buddy, responding to Ethan's request, demonstrated the gentle behavior that had become second nature to him. He offered his paw to shake hands, rolled over to show his belly in the ultimate gesture of trust, and then, in the most powerful moment of all, gently took Ethan's hand in his mouth. The same mouth that had once been trained to fight, and held it with such delicate care that not even the most skeptical observer could doubt his complete transformation. "Buddy's mouth is strong enough to hurt someone," Ethan explained to the silent courtroom, "but he chooses to be gentle because that's who he really is inside." The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. The dogfighting operation would be shut down permanently, its operators would face maximum sentences, And most importantly, all 12 rescued dogs would be placed in rehabilitation programs rather than euthanized. But the real victory came in the weeks that followed, when animal shelters across the state reported unprecedented adoption rates for dogs with difficult backgrounds. Ethan and Buddy's testimony had changed not just legal precedent, but public perception of what was possible when love met trauma. The final surprise came 6 months later, when the Humane Society presented Ethan with their first ever Youth Advocacy Award. As he stood on the stage, still small enough that he had to use a step stool to reach the microphone, Buddy sat beside him with the dignity of a dog who knew his life had meaning. "Thank you for this award," Ethan said to the crowd of animal advocates and reporters, "but I didn't do anything special. I just listened when Buddy needed help, and I loved him when he was scared. Anyone can do that. You just have to remember that